Tom Lemming, welcome back to Tuscaloosa, Alabama. I hope you're doing well.
Yeah, I'm doing great. Just hanging in there. We got finally getting some good weather up here in Chicago.
Good deal. Good deal. It's 80 here, but we've had some nasty conditions. But it's 80 degrees in Tuscaloosa. Why would anybody not want to come play football in T-Town with this type of weather?
That's absolutely right. And it looks like everyone does want to come and play there.
Tom, we want to get your thoughts on a lot of different things. Early signing period officially will be implemented December the 20th, 72-hour period. That was voted on earlier. Let me get your thoughts on the early signing period.
I've been an advocate for it for the past 20 years, so I'm glad they've finally done something, although it's strange that it's only about a month before the big signing period. I thought they'd do it maybe around September 1st. If you notice around the country, close to half of the players nationally are already committed. So why not get them out of the way around September 1st? And then college coaches could spend a lot more time with their own team because they won't have nearly as much time, to go out recruiting. Although I do know the nature of recruiting. If you let them have more time to go out with their own team, they'll probably spend it going after the next year's class. So I can understand that. And I do think that part of the reason why they're doing it December 20th is by that time, most coaches have been hired, fired, or moved on to the NFL or retired. And I think they're worried about ball players that have committed. Say if they did it in September and all of a sudden the coach is gone, the ball players obviously would not want to be held to that commitment and that letter of intent. So I could see why they were thinking about doing it in mid-December.
Tom, do you see a lot of people participating in this early signing period, or do you think we're still going to have that national holiday that we like to stop and recognize National Signing Day in February? Do you think that's going to be taking a little bit away that luster from National Signing Day?
No, I don't know. I think it's a good question, too. I think a lot of the ball players that are already committed may not even want to sign that day. They still may want to take other visits. That's what you've been watching over the past several years anyway. Ball players that are committed visiting other schools. So it'll be interesting to see how many actually want to sign. I'll bet if by that time, December 20th, I would imagine 3/4 of the entire country is committed by then. But I'll bet less than half of them, or around half of them, will only sign. Because I think there'll still be a lot of ball players that are committed to certain schools but still want to visit other schools. Like you see now, that's why there's been so many changes come late January with ball players decommitting and winding up at other schools anyway. So it's going to be interesting. I think it's going to be even more fun. If you notice over the past few years, there's probably been 40 to 50 ball players that are left around signing day. So it's been anticlimactic anyway. So maybe now at that early signing period, there's going to be other ball players that are going to be taking more visits in January because now, even though they were committed, they don't want to sign, and they're figuring, well, since I didn't sign, I might as well visit maybe 2-3 other schools. So I think it'll be probably more excitement.
Tom, do you see the trend of early enrollees continuing?
Yeah, I do. I think because the college coaches are pushing it, they like to get the ball players on campus because, it gives them extra time to practice. So instead of freshmen really coming in the fall and picking things up then, they could get acclimated academically, socially, and obviously athletically when they're having the spring game and the spring practices. So I do see more ball players who now are fixed on one sport. You remember back in the old days, ball players used to play football, baseball, track, basketball. Nowadays, they're really zeroing in on one sport. And when they're doing that, they realize that maybe that could be their future, especially if there's a Division I ball player going to Alabama or Auburn. So they're going to want to maybe come in earlier. So I do think that it's not only going to be continuing, but I think it's going to be, you'll be seeing even more ball players trying to finish school early so they can get to college and get a jump on the other players.
Tom, last Tuesday, Nick Saban inked a contract extension, extending him through 2024. There's no indication of slowing down. They're dedicated with money. He got a lot of people, a lot of different raises on his coaching staff. When you look at that, how much of that do you think was done in recruiting? Who knows if he'll make it to 2024, but it does give some, some counter to, you hear the rebuttal. He's got a few years left in the tank, and I've never agreed to that. I just like to ask you from a recruiting perspective, what do you see?
I think he's got many years left in the tank. I know he does sometimes people are worried about him burning out because he was such a hard worker. I think that contract's well-deserved. I've been doing this 38 years, but I've been following it probably for 50 years, and I have never seen a head coach as successful as Nick Saban has been, and that includes Bear Bryant and Woody Hayes and Eric Parsegian and Bo Schembechler and all Frank Howard and all the great ones. I do think that Alabama fans right now should enjoy Nick Saban as they have him over the next 10 years or so, because it's never going to. I don't think we'll ever see the like of him again when it comes to coaching and the combination of coaching and recruiting. I mean, it's such a competitive field, but he seems to have lapped the field over the past 7 years at least, and I don't see it stopping right now. I see it continuing, and I do see that Alabama's the juggernaut that everyone wishes they could be. And Alabama fans should enjoy it now, because after he does retire, it's not going to stay the same. It didn't stay the same with Bear Bryant and all the other coaches I had previously mentioned, and it won't stay the same with Nick. There'll be a downward trend for a while, and that's why fans should enjoy it while they have it.
Tom, what does he do different? You've covered recruiting. What does he do different than everybody else on the recruiting side of things?
You know what? I think it's the combination of intelligence, hard work, and persistence, and he understands that no matter how good of a coach you are, you win with impact ball players. And it was only Nick Saban, but Pete Carroll, Mac Brown, Phil Fulmer, those coaches had always told me the same thing, Urban Meyer, that no matter how good of a coach you are, to keep this kind of consistent winning streak going, you've got to have impact ball players. He understands that, and he recruits 365 days out of the year, and that's why he's been so successful. A lot of the head coaches that I watch, and I know most of them, they'd rather golf or make speeches. I mean, they do what they have to do recruiting, but they don't have that work ethic and that kind of persistence when it comes to recruiting. I think Urban Meyer has it. I think Dabo Swinney has it. And now Jim Harbaugh has it. I don't know if he's going to get burned out or not, because he's sort of a frenetic type recruiter. But those are the guys that have it. Most of the other head coaches, I mean, they'll obviously go at it and work at it, and they'll try to make their assistants do it, but not to the level that Nick Saban does it and his assistant coaches do it. And they built sort of an NFL-type program at Alabama when it comes to people behind the scenes that are getting information and getting – because, it's they don't make many bad decisions, and there's a lot of good ball players out there wanting to go to Alabama. I mean, if you offer 200 guys, you got to make sure you're bringing in the right 25. So it takes a lot of effort. It's sort of the way the NFL does it. And when you see teams like Patriots constantly drafting guys in late rounds, getting good ball players, you know that they put a lot of effort into it, and they've got a great system behind the scenes, and that's what Alabama has. It's different than everywhere else. And I do notice when I travel around, people try to hire Alabama people, the behind the scenes, either coaches or directors of operations or football people, because they know how successful they've been, and they like to get a little bit of that into their program.
Tom, he seems to enjoy recruiting and evaluation. Is that a little bit of an outlier when you talk about coaches truly saying they enjoy the recruiting process?
I know I do, but I don't have to coach along with it.
Sure,
I'm on the road 5 months out of the year checking out ball players, and I enjoy it. But I would imagine what I know, I would say less than 50% of the head coaches enjoy recruiting. And I know Nick Saban does. I know Harbaugh does. I'm not even sure if Urban Meyer does. He's very successful at it. But a good number of the head coaches that I know it's a necessary evil for them. But I think they'd rather be out on their boat or out golfing. So I would have to say that maybe only a third of the head coaches actually, they all talk and give it lip service, but I know a good number of them that don't enjoy it. And you can tell because they're not calling players most of the time during the year, or even because, you have to call a player September 1st of their senior year, but you can call the high school coach and ask the high school coach to make sure that great player calls you when he's a sophomore or if you've identified him as a freshman. I know Nick Saban does it because I've been sitting in football offices at high schools when Saban's called, and when I remember with Pete Carroll calling. I remember Lane Kiffin calling when he was head coach at USC. I'll get him, but it's always the same guys that are actually working on the sophomores and juniors and talking to the high school coaches to make sure. I was out at St. Peter's Prep in Jersey City, New Jersey last week, and Urban Meyer called Coach Hansen out there to talk to his junior-to-be defensive end, R.J. Oben, whose dad was an NFL star with the Giants. So, I mean, that's that extra effort that a lot of the coaches don't. It seems to be the same small group of guys when I'm on the road that are calling these players, and that's the reason for the success. It's perseverance, personality. You got to have a program like Alabama or Ohio State behind you. Probably only about 25 of those type programs in the country, because if you're doing it from Vanderbilt, it's much more difficult to get the ball player to call you back. But if you're Nick Saban, they're going to call you back, and that's why it's extra work. But in the long run, it pays off because he's landing these ball players. And I have never seen anyone have 7 straight number 1 classes. Notre Dame had 4 under Lou Holtz in the late 80s up to 1990, and that was the most I've ever seen. But having 7 straight number 1 classes is a good reason why you could count on Alabama being in the national title picture at least for the next 4 years.
Tom, when you look right now, I'm looking at Alabama. They're not off to a great start when we talk about recruiting. Is there a reason why they only have 3 verbal commitments right now? Is that alarming?
No, they are off to a great start. Don't ever go by what the websites have rankings because they're ridiculous at this time of year. Alabama's never number 1 at this time of year. But I've finished interviewing close to the top 2,000 players in the country in person and in their own hometown. And Alabama's still number 1 in my book when it comes to going to wind up who the top players are. They're followed closely this year by Ohio State. It looks like it's a 2-team race. And Southern Cal's actually doing very well out west, but right now it looks like it's Alabama, Ohio State 1-2. And I'm counting on ball players, the impact players that are looking at their program. But no one right now is close to Alabama. So when you look at and project it, they're number 1, way out in front of everyone else. And this is me. I'm the only guy in the country that actually goes out and sees everybody nationally. And I know it right now. Their name is in the top 5 of just about every single major top 300 player. No one else is even close. So Alabama's still number 1. And believe me, disregard these rankings at this time of year. It's silly to even put them out there, but people are trying to make money and get people to subscribe, so I understand it.
Tom Lemming, a great recruiting analyst. Tom, that's why we have you on as our sort of go-to guy, the grandfather recruiting. That's no offense. That's meant as a ton of respect. So
hey, I'm a couple years younger than Nick Saban, so I'm not that old yet.
Well, hey, listen, we enjoy the recruiting analysis that you provide, and a great way to connect with you. Lemming Report on the Twitter account. Tom Lemming, going into 38 or going into 39 years that you've been in the business?
I'll be 39 in October. My first trip, I took through the Midwest and the East, and part of that first trip was interviewing Dan Marino in high school at the University of Pittsburgh. So it was the October of 1978.